Hey there, chickens. It's finally time for Self-Love September. This is the month where I talk about self-love the entire time. I love doing it. It's my 6th year doing it now, believe it or not. There are playlists for all of the previous years. All of the content that I put out in the past is there for you to enjoy. So please enjoy all of the previous years and also come along for the ride with this one. I'm going to be talking about all kinds of different stuff. I'm going to be talking about things as varied as how to use a poppet for self-love in your magic and witchcraft and ritual, all the way to how to sustain a relationship with yourself when you're in a very intense relationship with someone else, which I think is a really important topic. I'm going to be talking about frenemies this year, so keep an eye out for that. If you feel like you've got a frenemy, and if you don't know what a frenemy is, definitely check out that description, because it might be something that you need to look into. And if so, there is material for you this month. There's all kinds of different things this month. I like to sit down and plan out in advance what is going to be a part of my SLS, and I couldn't be more thrilled about what I've chosen to discuss. So hopefully there's going to be a bit of something for everyone. This video is going to be all about accepting your spiritual side, coming out of the broom closet, coming out of the woo-woo wardrobe. That is a really important part of self-love. It's been vital for me on my journey, but I know it's been a lot easier for me than it has been for a lot of other people on theirs. There are numerous different reasons why a person might struggle with accepting their spirituality, with accepting themselves as a witch, etc. So we're going to be going into that today in this first video for SLS. I know that there's a massive bunch of people that I've come across on my journey while I've been making videos, while I've been doing spiritual counselling, etc., who think of themselves as being atheist, and they think of themselves as not having really any spiritual framework in their lives, and that's something that's been working for them. And for a lot of those people, they've come out from underneath the Christian umbrella, which is what they were kind of raised with, and it's been a really important part of their personal journey to reach atheism and be comfortable with atheism and be comfortable with, you know, being secular and be comfortable with all of that. So that's really a big reason why someone might want to hang on to the atheist paradigm. And there are other people who were never raised with any kind of religion at all and always came from an atheist household where perhaps religion was considered to be uncouth or silly, or impractical or just delusional. And so for those people as well, atheism is a big part of the identity. It's a big part of the way that they consider their own intelligence and their own integrity as a human being. For those two types of atheists, it's going to be particularly difficult when they start to get in touch with spiritual feelings and spiritual ideas. They're going to feel like, oh, okay, that's really anathema to the way I was raised or the way that I've come to see myself. I really like the fact that I'm atheist. I kind of have always thought of that as being an important part of my character and my outlook, and suddenly I want to talk with the fairies, or I want a relationship with a goddess, or I'm starting to get really prophetic spiritual dreams, you know, or I'm starting to find myself wandering into witchy shops and having a look at what's there and feeling like I'm really buzzing. I think for those people, it takes a while to get used to the fact that there's been a big spiritual change. Obviously, there are atheist witches. There are people who are atheists who do go on spiritual journeys. They just don't believe that there happens to be a godhead, right? So that's what makes one an atheist. But I think a lot of atheists that I've come across, that I've met, who utilize that label to describe their spiritual outlook, actually aren't into anything spiritual. There are atheist witches, as I said. There are definitely people who describe themselves as atheist and also describe themselves as spiritual, but it's not that common, I don't think. So that's why I utilize the term atheist to describe people who suddenly find themselves a little bit alarmed that they're having some deep spiritual inclinations or a desire towards deep spiritual practice on some kind of regular basis. Because that's not usually within an atheist framework. It can be, but it's not usual. And I think that atheist witches will agree, because it's hard for atheist witches to find each other a lot of the time. And they get fed up of all these bloody videos with people banging on about goddesses and things, because how lovely for witches that work with goddesses, but atheist witches find themselves sometimes a little bit out in the cold and wondering if they're on their own. If you're finding yourself in that kind of camp, then you're probably also worried about how people around you who are also atheist are going to perceive the fact that you're going on a spiritual journey. And I think that's true as well for people who are spiritual in some other way, like Christian or whatever, and then suddenly they find themselves moving towards the woo-woo side of the spectrum. There's a fear that Christian friends are not going to accept it. There's a fear of being ousted from the tribe in some regard. If you find yourself in any of those areas of things, one thing I would say is that it's going to take you some time to process the change that you're going through. It's going to take you some time to accept it. And sometimes it's not appropriate to bring other people into that process of acceptance right away, straight off the bat. You are allowed to keep things to yourself. You are allowed to go on your personal journey of transformation first before you tell yourself you need to open up, you tell yourself you need to communicate with others about it. Remember, other people aren't entitled to every single update straight away about what's going on in your spiritual journey. Your spiritual journey doesn't need to be a matter of public record. That's not how it works. It's your thing, and it's your thing principally, and it's your thing above all. And when you feel like it's time to let other people know, you can let them know exactly what it is you want them to know. You don't have to explain every single little thing. You get to choose in advance the information that you give to them. But one thing that you don't want to do is tell yourself that you're not allowed to explore any part of the spiritual journey that might appeal to you because of what other people are going to think of it, because of how other people might judge you, or because of the extent to which other people may not understand what it is that you're going through. I always say that it's only going to be me and me alone on my deathbed, and at that time, I'm definitely not going to be happy that I pulled away from something I really wanted to do because of other people's level of comfortability with it. So to me, I always take it to death. I always take it to perhaps the most extreme place that I can take it, typical Maddox. And I think at that time, when you're staring death in the face, are you going to be happy that you held back on that exploration? Are you going to be happy that you never opened up about it in any way that you wanted to at the time that it was right? Are you going to be happy that you felt beholden to the character that other people felt that you had? And are you going to be happy that you papered over your own interests and passions in order to maintain that image that other people have of you? And of course, the answer to these questions is invariably hell fucking no. I'm not going to be happy that I did those things. I want to let myself have what it is that tastes fizzy and feels juicy and delicious to me. I want to enjoy the things that feel splendid to me. And a lot of what feels splendid to me is goddesses, meditation, mythology, magic. Let yourself have those things. I want to let myself have those things. I think that is supremely self-loving. But you have to have a time on your journey when it comes to spiritual changes or realizing that you're into spiritual things, where you let yourself have that acceptance first. And sometimes it's not right to let everybody else in straight away. So it's about self-acceptance of the transformation first, self-acceptance of the beliefs first. Then you can think about other people coming in. Then you can think about telling people. You're not obligated to tell people. It's not your solemn duty to let others always know where you are with spirituality. So I want to sort of say that when it comes to people, whether they describe themselves as atheist or not, who are alarmed by their sudden desire to get into spiritual practice or their sudden inclination towards the spiritual, one thing that's important for people like that is proof. You know, a lot of people don't believe in anything spiritual or religious because they don't think there's any proof that it exists. They don't think there's any proof that there's merit in it. And for those people, I would just say, if you feel inclined towards spirituality, if you feel inclined towards spiritual practice, there is a kind of proof that you can look for. And it's the proof that it works for you. It's the proof that it makes your life feel better. It's the proof that it makes you into a better human being. And maybe it's important for you to switch to looking for that kind of proof. If you start engaging with a goddess, or if you start doing ritual, if you start performing magic spells, and you feel that it makes you fizzy, it makes you empowered, it emboldens you, it brings into your life a sense of majesty and mystery and excitement that wasn't there before, and it helps you to address your challenges in a way that you couldn't before, isn't that the kind of proof that you're after? And isn't that the kind of proof that is perfectly available to you if you do these things for any length of time? I think often when we're insistent upon proof, we forget that the proof is in the pudding with spiritual practice. If we do enough of it, we can see whether or not it's having a directly positive effect on our lives. And if we can obtain that kind of proof, why would we deny ourselves that kind of practice? Just seeing how amazing it is, what a positive benefit it's having on our lives, that's the kind of proof that I think we can definitely gather. And it's an undeniable form of proof, not only for ourselves, but for people around us as well. Gather the evidence that your spiritual journey or your spiritual thoughts that you're having are directly positively impacting your life. And I think that's the evidence that you need to be asking for. And that's the evidence that you can have a really valid interest in. And you can gather that evidence. It's perfectly available to you. Take it from me, allowing yourself to have a spiritual life and a spiritual practice is incredibly healing. It is very empowering. And for a lot of people, it is the level up that they've been looking for. And they might have tried to level up in various other different ways over the course of time, but something was missing. And that missing piece was allowing themselves to have a spiritual practice. Now, for me, obviously, I'm always going to say be sovereign in your spiritual practice, be freewheeling in the design of your spiritual journey. There is nothing wrong with looking over what other people are doing, but always be doing it with your heart searching for what it is that feels bubbly for you. There's no point in just taking something cookie cutter, taking something wholesale and making it into your practice. And I know people do that a lot when they're younger or when they're new to the path. But I think in the end, it becomes more obvious that we have to select the things that feel juicy to us and work for us and make sense for us as well. Make sense for our ancestry, make sense for our culture, make sense for our personality, make sense for our lifestyle, etc. One of the best ways to accept the fact that you are spiritual, that you are woo-woo, that you are witchy, is to be sovereign about it. Find out what inspires you, what empowers you, what speaks to you directly. Never mind looking to the left of you or to the right of you. I know I always say that, but it bears repeating. Never mind that. Put the blinkers on, go inside, look at what really does it for you. And that is one of the main ways in which you're going to be accepting of what it is that you feel like you want to build and what it is that you feel like you are spiritually, because you're listening genuinely to yourself and you're not trying to be anyone else. You're not trying to recreate anybody else's path. You're not necessarily interested in making it look like you've seen anybody else's look. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't take inspiration and that you shouldn't have a look at the cornucopia of what's out there. I do, other people do. But in the end, you want something that is structured to connect with you. Accepting the fact that you are a spiritual sort of person and that you want to have a spiritual practice is much, much, much harder when you're trying to make it fit exactly to the spiritual practice that you've seen somebody on YouTube have, or somebody on Instagram, or somebody amongst your friendship group, because you might not necessarily have the time that that person does. You might not have the financial budget that that person does. You might find that things are a little bit more topsy-turvy in your world, or you might find that you require certain kinds of magic or ritual or relationships with beings, etc., that your loved one or that person you follow on Instagram really doesn't. So you're going to be making yourself live up to something that doesn't really click with you. And that is definitely going to put a bit of a pin in your own personal acceptance of what it is that you want to do, because it's not really what's working for you. So of course it's going to be harder for you to really embrace it and hold it to yourself and be proud of it and eventually tell other people about it if you want to. Let's go back a little bit then to thinking about when you let other people into knowledge of your spiritual practice or your spiritual inclinations. That's a big part of the journey of acceptance for a lot of people. There are a lot of videos on YouTube about the broom closet, people's journey of coming out of the broom closet, answering questions that people have about the nature of the broom closet and when it's appropriate to leave the broom closet and say, here I am, I'm witchy, or the woo-woo wardrobe, as I like to call it. If you don't actually identify as a witch, but you are definitely spiritual, you're coming on out of that woo-woo wardrobe at some point. So really, I think the main thing that's important to note is that I think a lot of people make the mistake in thinking that coming out of the closet, stepping out of the wardrobe, that's what really makes a meal of it. That is what means that you're proud of your practice, that you are accepting of your own journey. It's when you start to tell others. Now, for me, I don't necessarily believe that's true. Think about all the people over the course of history who had a really meaningful spiritual practice of some kind who couldn't tell fucking anybody, because if they did, they would probably be hanged or burned at the stake or something. Think about the many people who had spiritual experiences that were outside the realm of the paradigm that was embraced by society widely, and think about how they kept all of that to themselves, and they might have really interacted with those experiences and had more and more of those experiences over the course of time, but they never told anyone. They never told anyone because it wasn't acceptable, because they didn't know how it would be taken, because it might put them into danger. And there are still situations like this all over the world right now where people are picky and choosy about who they offer this information to and how widely they actually make it known. Are those people somehow intrinsically not accepting of their own belief system? I don't think so. I think those people are trying to make some calculated decisions about how they're going to live in the world without being persecuted and without having perhaps too much to answer for and too many problems arising as the result of their own openness and honesty. It takes a lot of bravery to come out of the closet. It takes a lot of courage to waltz out of that woo-woo wardrobe sometimes and let people know that you are spiritual in some way, whatever that means for you. But I think we do have to acknowledge that there are going to be certain groups of people for whom courage is not enough. They know that the backlash is going to be too great. They feel that there is going to be danger, that they may lose their jobs, that it might go around their tiny little town and it might marginalise them, perhaps even more than they already are. There are times in a person's life where they just know intuitively that it's not the right time to perhaps be as open as they would like to be. And I think it's really important that we don't associate those people with a lack of acceptance in their own path or with a lack of legitimacy in their own path. You know, their path is valid, whether they never tell anybody about it or whether they tell everybody and the dog in the kitchen sink. You know, a path is valid. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that you're not betraying your beliefs because you're not telling everybody about them. And your journey of acceptance of your beliefs does not need to go hand in hand with telling people. Now, if you know that it is time to tell people, if you feel in your heart that it's time to come out and say it, then the first person you're going to pick is a person that you know you can trust. And for a lot of people, that's the exact same way as coming out about sexuality or any number of other things that they've been kind of confronting and dealing with in their own mind and their own heart first. They want to tell somebody that they love, that they trust. And then it might broaden out from there once they feel like they've gotten that confidence from telling somebody that they know will be open or accepting or really able to listen and hold space. So definitely think about who you trust. Definitely think about who it is that you feel like you can really tell that's going to hold that space for you and make you feel more comfortable as you make the admission and go into what it is that you've been experiencing. And know that you can tell someone that's going to feel excited for you and is going to feel delighted for what it is that you've got going on. There are lots of people who don't necessarily know anyone that might feel excited for them. And so they go online and they announce it to like a pagan Facebook group or, you know, something like that, where they feel like they're going to be able to be surrounded by people who are going to get it and are going to be excited about it. So whatever your personal situation is, there's a way, I think, always to express yourself to people who are going to get it and who are going to cheer you on and kind of give you that round of applause. When you do come out and tell people about your beliefs and when you do start to make it more widely known, always remember that you get to control the amount of information that you give when it comes to what people actually become privy to. So you don't have to give all of the detail about every single thing that you've been going through and experiencing spiritually. You can choose to be selective about the information that you provide. And I think that is a very important thing to note. And if people have questions, that's wonderful. But I think before you go into any kind of conversation where you're coming out of the wardrobe, you're stepping out of the closet, you need to know where your own line is on the information that you want to provide, because some people are going to be very curious and they're going to have 1,000,001 questions. And so you need to already know, I think, before you get into the conversation, how many of those questions you want to answer and how many of those questions actually feel comfortable for you. Also, don't forget that it's perfectly acceptable to say, I don't really know the answer to that question. Just because you've come out of the closet and said, I'm spiritual in some way, I'm applying these labels to myself now, or I'm having these practices, doesn't mean that you are the last word about every single thing that you're experiencing, every single thing you're going through. You're on a journey, and it's perfectly okay to not exactly know the Google Maps terrain of that journey. If you are not yet able to zoom out and take in the entire territory of what's going on with you spiritually, then say so. Just say, I'm not sure what's around that corner yet. I don't really know what's going on there. Everything's just baking slowly, and I'm letting you know that there's something in the metaphysical oven for me. But how it's going to turn out, I can't really say. And that's a really big part of acceptance of your spiritual self, is to know that it is a journey. It's not, you're not a cartographer. You can't look back and say, this is the entire map of exactly where I've been, exactly where I am, and exactly what's around the next corner. And a big part of accepting your spirituality is to recognize, I don't really know. I'm leaning into it. I am ceasing resistance to it. I'm letting it take me, and I'm being comfortable with that journey. I'm taking some photos. I'm seeing where it goes, you know, I'm writing a travel blog, but I myself can't be sure of all the different variables and what's going to happen next. Okay, so let's talk about nasty reactions, lack of respect for your spiritual path, all that stuff. I know that's something a lot of people have had to deal with. It is definitely very common for people that come from a Christian framework in their family or in their town, in their culture where they reside, and looking at what they're culturally immersed in. If Christianity is a big part of it, then often there's going to be an issue for people accepting it. Also, it's the same way if your culture or your family or your people in your surroundings are sort of hardline atheists, non-spiritual atheists, right? There's going to be a similar kind of issue arising there. There's also probably going to be a problem for people who've just had the very same spiritual outlook for a long time, and everybody's become used to what that outlook is, and suddenly there's been a massive change of some kind. Sometimes that can set people off on the wrong foot. It kind of like unsettles people, and that can be another reason why there might be an unpleasant reaction at first. I always say that it is nobody else's job to sort of take on your belief structure. It's actually nobody else's job really to accept fully your belief structure. But what needs to happen if those people are in your life is that they do have to have some respect for the fact that it is your belief structure and it is important to you. So one thing that I would ask you is, what does respect look like for you? If you were to envision somebody's respect for your spiritual path, what does that respect entail? For me, a respect for my spiritual path entails not disparaging it. You don't need to ask me about it. You don't need to be interested in it. You don't have to want to talk to me about it for 3 straight hours. You don't need to watch my YouTube videos. You know, you don't need to have any vested interest at all in my path. But you need to not say anything disparaging about it, and you need to acknowledge that it is important to me. And that for me is respect. I'm not expecting anybody to dive balls deep into my spiritual paradigm. In fact, I rarely, if ever, talk about what's going on in my spiritual journey with people in my life. Most of the people in my life do not have what you would immediately see as any kind of spiritual journey. They certainly do not practice anything spiritual on a regular basis. The majority of people in my life do not do that, okay? Are they still very spiritual people? I would say in some ways, definitely, but not in the same way that I am. I don't expect those people to stop and go, oh, hey, how's everything going spiritually? What's going on there? You know, and dive into that, because they don't really have any frame of reference for that necessarily. It's not something they read about. It's not something that they really do. But I do expect that people understand that it's important to me. It's a really big part of my life. And if something were to ever arise where spirituality was a part of the conversation, it's lovely to know that I'm surrounded by people who would say, oh, you know, Kellyanne knows about that, or Kellyanne's interested in that, or let's see what she has to say because it's something that she's immersed in quite a lot. That's as far as it needs to go with me. I'm not expecting people to be really interested in it to the point where they're bringing it up or anything like that. And for me, I think sometimes people that are spiritual and who are really into it, and it's really a big part of their lives, I think they do expect sometimes a little bit too much interaction about it from other people. I know a lot of spiritual people who might be with a non-spiritual partner or surrounded by non-spiritual friends. Look, let's be honest, they do kind of bang on about spirituality a little bit too much. Imagine if the person that you were with was really, really into motorbike racing and they knew every single thing about motorbike racing and they were so into it and they were always going on about it. And they were saying, oh, I saw this and I saw that and this rider did this and, you know, this is what parts they were using and what model of bike. And, you know, way back in the 70s, these were the kind of bikes. For fuck's sake, it would drive you mental, wouldn't it? It would drive me mental. I don't give a fuck about motorbike racing. I do like motorbikes. They're very sexy, but that's the long and short of it. If you're really into motorbike racing, by the way, this example is just not going to work for you. So pick something else. I don't know, baking or like a particular kind of vintage fashion or a particular area of astrophysics. It's like, if it's something that means really very little to you and it's not something that you're ever likely to research, it's going to be dull to have somebody bringing the conversation back to that. That's disrespectful to the other person. That's disrespectful to their time. And that is really as honest and as brutal as I can be. That's the spiritual tea, baby cakes. We cannot just expect someone to be like, oh, you know, I love it when you bring everything back to the 7 chakras, the 7 key chakras. Fascinating for me, who doesn't give a fuck about the key chakras and has never worked with them in my life and is never likely to. But please explain to me how I have a blockage in my heart chakra. Yes, that's relevant to the conversation. Like, obviously that's going to annoy somebody. So if you know that you're in that category of spiritual person who is bringing things around to your spiritual interests a little bit too much, pull back on that. And if you want even more tea on this, I'll give it to you. And I'll give it to you straight and hot, okay? So get your teacup ready. The spiritual people who go on about spirituality too much and just make every single conversation eventually about spirituality with people who are really not that spiritual and are not interested in that, Those people are really looking for an external permission slip. That's what I really think. I think that they're looking for everybody around them to get into it because it makes them feel more secure in it, and it makes them really, really, really feel like they're allowed to be spiritual. That's what they're really looking for. And you know what? No one else can sign that slip for you. No one else can do it. It is a slip that you and you alone need to sign. And you can't expect everybody else around you to suddenly drop what they're doing and say, yeah, you know, I'd love to come to an angel, like an angelic messages meeting with you, or I'd love to hear again, you know, how deeply you're into Abraham Hicks or whatever. You can't ask everybody around you to do that so that you can finally feel like it's okay for you to be spiritual and everybody accepts it and it suddenly becomes something that you're comfortable and positive about. You've got to just become comfortable and positive about it. It's nobody else's duty to make you feel like it's a journey that they're on as well. It's not a journey that they're on as well, quite probably, but that doesn't matter. That shouldn't matter. You should still be able to come to this point of deep acceptance without feeling like this non-spiritual partner or friend or family member has to suddenly be like, oh yes, do go on, do tell me about your relationship with the Archangel Michael or what spellcraft means to you. If they don't care and they don't want to know, that's fine. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is a lack of acceptance from them. It just means that they have their own shit going on. And remember as well, if you're somebody that does want to update people on the main parts of your spiritual journey, so say for example, if you've been through a big spiritual transformation or you have read something new in spirituality and you're really excited about it, then fine, those are the kinds of things that you might want to explain to your loved one, your partner, your friends, whatever, because it's exciting to you and it's a significant change in your spiritual path, and your spiritual path is a big part of your life. So if you want to be able to give those big key updates, brilliant. But make sure that you ask yourself, do you let other people in your life give you their big juicy updates about the things they're going through? So say, for example, you want to tell your husband that you've had a big shift in your paradigm with your witchcraft and it's a really big deal, and you want to talk to them about it over dinner because you're really excited. Okay, fine. But the last time they wanted to talk to you about their live action role playing experiences and how excited they are about that, did you listen? Did you give it your time, or did you kind of glaze over? Or did you even say, that's lovely, honey, but I don't understand about that? It works both ways. It cuts both ways. If you want to be able to talk about your spirituality to an extent and give those main things that are exciting and juicy, then you've got to have your ears open and be engaged when your loved one wants to talk to you in return about something that interests them that you have no vested interest in. I'm going to read something now that I wrote down in my notes for this episode of Self Love September. It says part of respecting your beliefs is not necessarily having to be involved with them. So part of other people respecting them isn't necessarily involvement in them. Don't expect involvement from your loved ones, and don't expect them to listen to every single fine detail of every spiritual change or breakthrough. Accept that an overt desire to talk a lot about your path to a non-spiritual loved one could be a sign that you're seeking external validation. A really key way to become more accepting of your spirituality is to involve yourself in spiritual community. Now, every person has their own idea of how involved they want to get and what they actually want to bring to the table. Some people want to start their own channel. Some people are not about that life. Whatever happens, whatever goes on, you need to know that spiritual community is a place where you can really thrive and get hold of new ideas, and also engage with other people about their ideas and support their journeys as well. It is definitely a really positive thing for the most part. Are there negative aspects of spiritual community? Absolutely. But you have to use your own intuition to navigate those things and kind of dance around any shitstorms and make sure that you're getting from it whatever you want to get from it, essentially. Ask yourself, are you engaging in spiritual community? Would that be something that would be good for you? Are you on the perimeters of in spiritual community, but maybe you want to get more engaged with it as the result of watching this video? Maybe you feel like you want to open up more to people who are really interested in what's going on with you. And again, not so you can get a permission slip. The permission slip really essentially has to come from within, because you could post a million different photos of your altar on Instagram, but in the end you are the one sat in front of it performing a ritual or doing a devotional or doing a meditation. You and you alone. Your Instagram following are not there with you cheering you on. They're not at your shoulder saying, hey, awesome, this is great, we're so accepting of you, we love this for you, we stand this, you queen. They're not there doing that, all right? They're not there doing that. It's you on your own, allowing yourself to have that spiritual experience. So social media, spiritual community, whether it's online, whether it's in person, will not be the ticket that you need if you're not accepting of what it is that you're going through. You've got to get it from here. And you get it essentially through, first of all, gathering proof that it's working for you, it's making you feel better, it's joyful for you. And second of all, recognizing that if you were to die tomorrow and you'd never really let yourself taste this incredible spiritual curiosity that you have, it would be a regret for you. And that is really the gravity of the situation. That's what you really need to recognize. Go forth, darlings, be spiritual, enjoy yourselves. Welcome to Self-Love September. There is so much more coming. I'm very, very excited about it. And I hope that this has been an interesting opening episode. So much love and self-love, honeybees. Blessed be.